Is it nature? Is it art? Is it philosophy? Is it love? Is it friendship? What is it for me that when I think about it, I feel wrapped up, contained, and full of purpose, like religious people, like Muhammad Ali did when he was beating Joe Frazier?
I still got the world! I still got the world! Wait a minute. You must listen to me!
What is God? Let me try that again. I want the longest one ever. What is God? It's one of the most important questions people ask themselves. Is there a higher power? Is there a purpose to this existence? Is there something bigger than my own feeble human interests? Things like buying soap at Bed Bath & Beyond. Things like getting a raise at work from a boss who sexually harasses you. You know, human things. As a religious studies major, I've probably experienced every primary religion, whatever Kanye West believes in. I don't know if I've experienced that. So I've gone on a huge journey with this question, and today I finally wanted to settle. What do I think God is? We went to Lake Arrowhead. Welcome to Lake Arrowhead. We spoke to a Seventh-day Adventist.
The fruits of the Spirit, or in other words, the attributes of God, it has them in order. It says number one is love, or agape. It's like giving without expecting anything in return. That's number one. Right after that is
joy.
That's it.
Yeah, love and joy.
We spoke to some Christians. What are your thoughts on God? Do you have a personal opinion of God?
He's cool.
Yeah.
I respect him, you know. I do my thing.
I'd have lunch with him. So there's a lot of distinctions going on, and I think everybody has their own personal relationship with a higher power. That's why when you go to AA and you're trying to quit drinking, the first thing they tell you is get something bigger than yourself, because if you don't, you should be drinking, probably. What do people think of when they think of God? One example stood out to me, my hero, Muhammad Ali.
Pretty cool guy.
He's great, right? And I recognized pretty early on that his confidence wasn't narcissism. He was serving something bigger than his ego. I had a feeling with Muhammad Ali that he had some sweet stuff that wasn't available to me.
Hold it, you're not that pretty. I'm a bad man!
I wanted that level of self-belief. When I started to peel back his story and realized how the Nation of Islam came in, and he sort of became subservient to an idea of a higher power, Allah. In Islam literally means to kneel, to submit. That idea, I couldn't rationalize with who Muhammad Ali was. How could one be so beyond self-doubt?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I must tell you this.
And yet also think that they are kneeling beneath something that sort of pales them in comparison. When I talked to religious folks, they had a glow about them. They had a sense that maybe they could just let go of anxiety because either God made them in a certain image or they were serving a certain purpose. But I knew that I had to find a way in that felt authentic to me. Any version of God I can conceive of isn't conscious yet. And it might be. It might be. I'll tell you what my view of God is. But does a God have to be conscious and caring of you in particular? Or can they just be the creator, the source of energy?
The revelations that I'm aware of, it has said that it is a personal God, and that we are made in his image and we're personal beings.
Their belief was that a couple things. One, God works in mysterious ways.
Since I wasn't there and it would be beyond me, I guess it could be anything that I guess it wanted to be.
Two, God likes to see us overcoming things. That was their idea.
God said he won't give you anything that you cannot handle. But it doesn't say your life won't be hard.
God is like us. God is like a human being. I start to imagine a God where they can be fallible, but they're never fallible. Is that the idea?
He experiences hurt, and like his heart breaks when he sees people turn away from him.
If you've ever gotten into science fiction, you'll see there's actually some interesting representations of that idea. One of my favorite movies was Watchmen. And they have a character, Dr. Manhattan, who sort of becomes a god.
But I can't change human nature.
Through science, he escapes the limits of his human soul, and he starts making life, making planets at the end of the movie.
I thought you said you cared about life again.
I do. I think maybe I'll create some.
And I thought, wow, that's a pretty literal interpretation of what some Christians believe. when you get into simulation theory, all of a sudden you go, in terms of math, in terms of what mathematicians say, the probability of us being a natural occurrence rather than a computer simulation is almost none. Some really smart people I've talked to who aren't potheads watching YouTube videos believe simulation theory has the best logical basis of anything. And what is that if not a God creating a computer program that we can walk through, where all of these non-player characters and player characters can exist so that the person creating it can just kind of get a kick out of seeing how different people use the variables.
There is no easy way to say this. This world, it's a video game.
And in those games, it's not always honky-dory. There's death, there's pain, there's tragedy, there's boredom. So this, I can start to wrap my fingers around a little bit. And the question becomes, why would God, if they did create a video game, allow for things like the Holocaust? If you've read the book Night by Elie Wiesel, a famous writer who survived the Holocaust, the story in that book was about a man losing his religion. After witnessing Auschwitz, after witnessing the horrors that human beings are capable, he said, how could God create this in his image? And I think a lot of people who lose their religion come from that place of cynicism. I certainly did. Where I'm coming back to is the idea that religion, some of these debates, some of these distinctions have gotten us off of the path of the personal relationship to a higher power.
We strongly believe that nature is God's second book. And so if there is a creator, and if that creator is the embodiment of love, you'd be able to see that as you're spending time with nature and in relationships and experiencing a lot of these good things.
I decided to sort of put some skin in the game and really visualize my God. And what I came down to is they had it right at first, the Egyptians. The sun is God. God is the sun. We've got a giant ball of energy. So the soul is the animated form of that energy on this planet. The little grass starts to perk up, and you know what? There's no individual grass. The grass feeds the soil with as much of God's light as it can get.
It's agape.
It's agape. Yeah, that's the light. That's to me, I'm hearing everything y'all are saying, and then I'm seeing it. Now let me explain a little more, because that sounds like a cop-out, right? Ra, the sun god of Egypt, was the first higher power that I've come across. When you started seeing societies form around the heavenly movements of bodies, that really took root. So almost anywhere you go, you'll find some variation of people looking up at the sun and the moon and the stars and trying to figure out what that is. The sun comes up, it grows the crops which animals eat. Animals then are eaten by larger animals. This conservation of the sun's energy on Earth and the transformation of the sun's energy on Earth is real. And much like God, the sun is omnipotent. It gives off so much power that even its waste energy is enough to nurture life on a planet. It's like a fart or a burp or something. It's just giving it off, never deciding who deserves it, who doesn't. There's something beautiful and godlike about that. God might be getting mad at me, the wind's blowing. The Egyptians literally believed God was a conscious creator. I've been thinking about it scientifically. So if you put a bowling ball in the center of a mattress, it creates a divot in the mattress. That's similar to the divot in space-time that a sun creates. And you let something rotate around it, it forms a natural orbit. And a pressure starts to build up. That pressure presses everything into a diamond. And there are diamond planets that we've observed just from high pressure. If you look at the core of our Earth, you'll see diamonds speckled throughout from the way the pressure of the plates push together. Actually, it's quite beautiful. It takes all of the all of the atoms within that and pushes them into such a fine little perfect order that you can see through it. And that's a weird idea that reminds us that we're all made of empty space. The more something is dense, the clearer it is. Weird. But in terms of the sun, there's a step beyond that. When you get enough pressure, those very atoms themselves start to break down. We started as a universe with carbon and some of the main hitters, but stars exploding and creating this pressure actually created a radioactivity that turned the few elements we had into many elements. And now we have a whole periodic table, and we can thank the sun for that. The pressure that the sun creates, manifested in this. There is a majesty to that. There is a majesty to how simple that relationship between this endless source of energy is and us. It's the only reason we're not dead like most of the observable universe. So what does this mean? If we know that the sun is a creator, we don't know if it's a conscious creator. We've never heard the sun talk. And that seems to be something that's really important for religious people. You know, it's moving to me to hear people describe their relationship with Jesus. They say things like, I didn't have a father growing up.
I have a dad, like a stepdad, but he wasn't home a lot. Anyway, I learned how to respect through the Bible and like just learn from that. And I talk to God every day in my head and all the time out loud, and just like a relationship as if I'm talking to a father or a friend, and I'm never alone that way.
I lost my dad a few years ago, and he was a big figure in my life, and I still talk to him all the time. There's a future version of me and a version of my dad that when I'm running or doing something I want to stop, it just says, show me something. You know, he's like curious, he wants to see what I can do. I wanted something I could sink my teeth into, something I could believe, and something that wouldn't make me feel like I was bigger than I was, but actually smaller. Some people look up at the night sky and it gives them anxiety.
Hopefully this doesn't disregard anything, but I believe the earth is flat off of what the Bible picks and stuff like that in Jewish translations of the earth and everything.
Not to push back, but I think that's just to make us the center.
Right, and that's because God wants us to feel important, because a lot of people like NASA makes you feel like you're not important. Like space is so vast and wide, right? Like why do you matter?
Well, I get the opposite feeling though.
Yeah?
It's like when I'm outside of the Grand Canyon, I feel the sublime. So I connect to that bigger picture.
Yeah.
But I ask everyone, it's 50-50. Some people go, it gives me anxiety. When I look up at it, it relieves all of my human problems completely, and I'm free to just be. Whether you're jumping off a building in a wingsuit or worshiping, you know, with tears down your face at the Wailing Wall, whatever you're doing is getting yourself, your ego out of the way so you can experience the majesty around you and preferably feel like you're not only a part of it, but you're the whole thing. I mean, if this existence is a soup, would you ever say a celery is a celery within a soup? Or would you just say it's soup? You don't make distinctions. Where's the salt in a soup? Where's the sugar in a cake? If we are all one thing, to say and to witness the beauty and magnificence around you is to witness yourself. And that's something I believe. So what is bigger that we can observe than the sun? Nothing. And more determinate. I mean, all of our extinction events on this planet are linked to the sun being blocked out. For example, if a supervolcano went off, it would block out the atmosphere. We'd no longer get that sunlight. It would start an ice age and we'd all die. So when I think of the sun as God, beating down on me, literally giving me vitamin D, giving me energy, feeding all the plants that make up my diet, feeding the animals that make up my diet. When I think of the sun as creating a temperature, a Goldilocks zone where life itself could exist, I'm starting to get reverent. I'm starting to feel things. And I start to ask myself, well, what would be the best way to serve this accidental transfer of energy, even before I understand what the human experiment and the experiment of life is moving towards? All I have to do is open myself up to receive that energy in its many forms. That can come from the sun, that can come from what I eat, that can come from receiving from other people, which, like I said, we're all sunlight dancing on the earth. So I can receive from those other dancers. This to me is like watching a ballerina on her toes. Like, look at it. It came back from injury, and I can't imagine a more perfect angle to bring in as much of that abundant sunlight to the soil as it can. And it's doing it for these other guys.
And these guys are flourishing. It's beautiful.
If you believe that the sun is the source of energy, maybe you call it God, maybe you just call it a fingerprint of God. I mean, obviously, if he made it for us, it's worth looking at that fingerprint, right? Maybe even just using that as the totem that we worship, before we know the true story of what's beyond.
The sun is this awesome thing. Well, how much does that show that our value or importance is to someone?
Yeah. Socrates especially believed that a perfect godlike being would be reflected within us. The ancient Greeks believed that, if there is a higher form, a God, we should see it in the virtues within us. Because why would God, a perfect being, create something that's not reflective of him? And so if we are like the Son, if we are like God, that must mean that we are omnipowerful and that we give our energy to everyone, right? There's no distinctions. So if you're receiving light and you're nurturing your own body, you're going to be a better vessel for sunlight. Receive it, nurture the soil around you, and watch what happens. There's a reason so many believers see nature as the real temple. There's a reason people who are even non-believers use nature as their temple, or perhaps exercise, the body, going into the body, meditating. These are our tools, and if we use them right, you really don't have to figure anything out. The soil is nurtured, the people around you are nurtured, and you're receiving as much energy as you can. And you know what human beings do with energy? They turn it into something cool and nifty and unique or horrible. Oh, this is our hero. Mm-hmm. This gal. We'll call her Cindy. So for Cindy, Cindy's doing the right thing. She's growing as much as she can to bring as much sunlight in as possible. But Cindy might have a conversation with Dwayne over here, and he says, look, why am I not where you're at? Why don't you come down here to visit me more? And when Cindy comes down, they're just talking about how the sun isn't that great, and you shouldn't have to reach for the sun. But this plant returns to its instinct and says, wait a minute, I remember what the sun felt like, and I'm going in the wrong direction. But my buddy Dwayne over here would be pissed if I went back out to the sun, because he's become accustomed to me being down here with him. I'm gonna have to reach for some higher purpose to remind myself that actually, if I stay down here with Dwayne, we're both gonna wither. And I'm gonna do this for Dwayne. And so you start rising up, and Dwayne's like, what the f? But then you're rising, you're growing. And this time you grow so big, and so much of that energy passes into Dwayne. All of a sudden, from a mix of looking at you and being inspired and feeling this new energy that you just delivered to them through your feet into the soil. I think it's as direct as that. Every time I'm walking down the street, I feel it with the people that are passing me and interacting with me. So you're starting to grow. You're feeding Dwayne. You're feeding others, and you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger because you're taking that abundant energy. You're not taking from others. You're taking from that abundant energy that you rose up to find. And there's no limit to how much of that there is, to how well we could grow and live and preserve this planet. So now Dwayne's up to Cindy's level, and then Cindy can hang out with Dwayne there and say, see how nice this is? I'm so glad you came. Does that make sense? When you see it, you believe it.
The idea is that by beholding, you become changed, or scientists...
Whoa.
By beholding, you become changed. Huh. Or scientists might talk about it like mirror neurons, or some people will say birds of a feather flock together. So basically, what you focus on, it reacts upon you, and you basically become more like it.
Right.
And so for me, if I focus on a God of love or on an altruistic sort of being, that alone is going to have a positive impact. I get more ideas, I get more encouragement to, I guess, walk in that path.
Wow, I love that. Cindy's gonna have those moments when she goes, am I being selfish right now for bringing this sunlight into the soil? It sounds crazy when you talk about plants, but that's what human beings do all the time, every day of their lives. And thoughtful people will help others break through that, because we're all the same. Cindy realizes in a moment of awakening that she is Dwayne. Because look.
They're together.
They're the same. It's the Jesus dance, right? You're just opening up to the sun. Or the statue of David, who's a little more aloof. Anyway, I hope that wasn't too hippy-dippy for you all. It's just a few thoughts I've had that have actually helped me, made me feel more energy, and I'd love to hear from you all. Hopefully this can be the beginning of a discussion. I never get tired of hearing what people derive meaning from. Having a higher power has sort of released me from judging my actions and how they're received and how people appreciate them, and just turning into something that is transforming energy. So there's going to be a video week coming that's just straight from the gut, straight from the heart, straight from the subconscious, the lizard brain, all of them together, inspiration, this gentleman, and I hope that creates more exciting content. I hope it looks fun, and join us on the ride. Raw.